Refugees, security, and reality. I'm Brian Lilley with TheRebel.Media. We've been told not to worry, nothing to see here, no cause for concern about refugees and security. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you can believe the good members of Justin Trudeau's Liberal cabinet, or you can believe your lying eyes. From the sex attacks in Cologne, Germany, hundreds of women sexually assaulted at New Year's Eve celebrations by bands of men, many of them refugees, to the suicide attack that killed 10 people in Istanbul this week, the charges against refugees related to terrorism in the U.S., and the decision by American officials, reported on by the left-wing New York Times, to pull their people out of Lebanon and screening Syrian refugees due to security concerns. Well, with what we're seeing, it should give us all pause for concern. Let me state once again, I have no doubt that there are real refugees, plenty of them, in need of assistance. People that have fled the civil war in Syria. But as even our own immigration officials will admit, most of those just want the fighting to end so they can go home. But others do want to completely start their life anew somewhere else. Canada's always been a welcoming country for immigrants and refugees. That doesn't mean we've been immune to attacks from those among our ranks willing to harm us. I'm not just talking about the jihadis of today, people like Chiheb Essigar, one of the Via Rail plotters who wants to be tried according to the Quran, not Canadian law, or his co-conspirator, Rahid Jasser, a refugee claimant that Canada wanted to deport. I'm also talking about Irishmen who supported the Fenian raids, or yes, even Germans like Karl Respa, who carried out attacks on Canadian soil in the First World War to stop our fight against the Kaiser. It's not a new idea. The thought that those coming to Canada, though, might also want to harm us, it's not only absent from our history books, it's absent from the minds of our Liberal government. People say they're refugees, therefore they must be good. Well, tell that to the families of those killed in Istanbul. From the Wall Street Journal, Turkish officials identified the bomber as Nabil Fadli, a Syrian national born in Saudi Arabia in 1988 who was fingerprinted in Turkey last week while registering as a refugee with immigration officials. Echoes of Paris and the terror attack of November 13th, where some of the terrorists entered Europe as refugees. But to Canada's Liberal government, we are immune to that. Well, calls for them to separate the wolves from the lambs, they're met with disdain. Then there's what happened in Cologne, Germany on New Year's Eve. Hundreds of women sexually assaulted. The mayor of Cologne, though, telling women to dress properly to stop this. The interior minister saying comments denouncing the sexual assault on right-wing websites, well, they're as bad as the attacks on women themselves. Why? Because of the links, proven links to groups of men of Arab and Middle Eastern extraction carrying out the sex attacks. This is part of the problem they're dealing with in Germany and other European countries. Could it happen in Canada? I certainly hope not, but asked about it, and the response from the Liberal cabinet isn't reassuring. Here's Health Minister Jane Philpott.
As you know, part of the resettlement package involves cultural integration, and our Minister of Heritage in Canada is working very hard along with multiple partners across the country to make sure that we do a good job of the integration phase, which is ultimately the most important phase, is to make sure that these Syrian refugees become well integrated into Canadian culture, that they understand our cultural values and practices.
All right, so Philpott, the health minister, says we have to have some cultural integration programs. Scarily, that is better than the immigration minister, John McCallum, and what he has to say. After noting that Canada is bringing in families as opposed to all the single men flooding into Germany, he said this.
The other point I would make is that Canada has a very long tradition of successfully welcoming and integrating newcomers. I am about the last one to say that Canada leads the world in every single thing, because we don't. But I think one thing on which we do lead the world is our capacity to integrate people, to build up a successful multicultural society.
Multiculturalism will not protect you from cultures that view women as chattel or as objects to be used. And dealing with that sort of worldview, well, that takes a few generations to deal with, to work itself out, not a few weeks. So women in Canada, yeah, they should be concerned. But don't worry, we have a new government in sunny ways in Canada now. That's what McCallum tells us. We have a progressive government led by Justin Trudeau. Everything's going to be better. You know what? They've had a progressive government in the United States led by the far left progressive Barack Obama, apologizer in chief. and it still hasn't protected them from the jihadis. He even cozied up to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, invited them to sit front row for his speech in Cairo on his apology tour. It didn't matter. The United States remains a target. Refugees from Iraq recently arrested in Texas and California in separate incidents on charges that they plan to aid and abet ISIS. As the current batch of refugees, well, the New York Times, they report that Homeland Security under the Obama administration actually stopped interviewing Syrian refugees in Lebanon a year ago out of concern for the safety of their own people. Now, against that backdrop, all of this, the Trudeau Liberals, they preach sunny ways. They tell us not to worry. Well, fortunately, the Canadian people not only have warm and welcoming hearts, they also have eyes to see, ears to hear, and the common sense to know that we should all be proceeding with caution.